I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm a psychotherapist. A lot of honors students, 8th graders mostly, who were self-mutilating. My phone never stopped. And I didn't know why. I asked the kids, and all they kept saying was, "We can't take the pressure, it's too much." I also started getting a lot of elementary school students referred to me. They were refusing to go to school. They said they felt stupid and that school was too hard. They were throwing tantrums, begging to stay home, and upset to the point of vomiting. I was hearing from parents about kids bringing home homework they couldn't help them with. I was alarmed to hear that in some cases there were no textbooks for the parents to look at, and they had no idea what their children were learning. We can't regulate biology. Young children cannot engage in the type of critical thinking that the Common Core calls for. That would require a fully developed prefrontal cortex, a part of the brain that is not fully functional until adulthood. This isn't rocket science. It doesn't take a great deal of technology or corporate or government involvement to help our children to succeed. We need to rethink the Common Core and the associated high-stakes testing and get back to the business of educating our children in a safe, healthy, and productive manner. Thank you.
Okay, there's not nearly enough time in this presentation to show the scale of the damage that Common Core has wrought or represents for the future. So I'll pull clips from these following videos, which are much more detailed. Common Core exists mainly because the richest man in America, Bill Gates, bankrolled it. It is a hostile takeover of local school systems across the nation, and it was pushed through with subterfuge and propaganda. What's more, it's a fraud. The standards are poor, invented by non-educators, and completely experimental.
It's not internationally benchmarked, and indeed, there's no research behind it. In particular, there is no guarantee whatsoever that any of these courses will work.
Content experts Sandra Stotsky and Jim Milgram were both put on Gates' validation committee for the Common Core standard in order to grant them legitimacy, to approve them, and both did not. Now they speak out against Common Core.
In terms of standards, the state-led Common Core State Standards Initiative is developing clear, rigorous standards that will match the best in the world.
Common Core says it is research-based, internationally benchmarked, and you have these boards of education members who were certainly, as I said earlier, motivated well, well-intentioned. They're educated people, whether they're appointed or elected, and they believe this. They believe that the standards are rigorous, even though they can't tell you what makes for a rigorous or a non-rigorous standards. They simply don't know how to read a set of standards.
And these people have not been very forthcoming. They've been very careful in what they say, and I don't think they've given the public any real idea of what's actually going on.
We were expected to say, apparently, that these standards were internationally benchmarked, they followed procedures that were appropriate, a few other things. And I couldn't do that. Then, about 2 weeks later, I discovered there was a report on the validation committee on the website for Common Core. It simply listed the members who were on the committee, and then it listed the names of people who signed on. But when I counted up the number of names, we were missing 5, so that's when I figured out that there were 5 people who had not signed on.
5 out of 30 is a very large number, considering the fact that we were under enormous political pressure to actually sign on.
It would be great if our education stuff worked, but that we won't know for probably a decade.
Bill Gates, a non-educator, glibly ponders if his, quote, education stuff might work after a decade of subjecting a generation to it. The man most responsible for Common Core, other than Bill Gates, is David Coleman of the National Governors Association. Okay, this is a lobbying group, nothing more. It has nothing to do with education or the, quote, states, when their defenders claim it's, quote, from the states. It's from a lobbying group, not the people of the states, obviously. Political spinmeisters, for legal reasons, claim that they have not developed a curriculum, but teaching to the test is the curriculum. David Coleman brags about this deception.
These teachers will teach towards the test. There is no force strong enough on this earth to prevent that. There's no amount of hand-waving. There's no amount of saying they teach to the standards, not the test. We don't do that here.
These teachers will teach towards the test. There is no force strong enough on this earth to prevent that.
Obama's Race to the Top program is what pushed Common Core into the states. Education Secretary Arne Duncan claims that Common Core is not mandatory, but he rigged the qualification system so that states needed a certain number of points to qualify for the money. And the only way to get those points was to adopt the Common Core standards, so they were coerced. Duncan argues in favor of Common Core at length while simultaneously claiming a hands-off approach. This is doublespeak. Plausible deniability is how they phrase it in DC, and basically political trickery.
So we learned that a big square like this is 100. And we have 60, which are just 9 to 10. There. The dots represent 1.
Okay.
So now we have to add all of these together. I got 2 different answers.
You got 2 different answers. What do you think happened?
Maybe I counted wrong.
Looks like you did the stacking correctly, and that took you about a minute.
So I think I did something messed up on this sheet.
What do you think happened?
Since that way was more confusing.
That's a smart little girl.
Okay, students are not allowed there to use the stacking form of addition, and if they use the stacking addition that the whole world uses, and they get the answer correct, it's still marked wrong. And just because something is different doesn't make it better.
The trouble is, you can't do something this radical, where you're cutting out chunks of the mathematics we've done traditionally for well over 100 years, without having some research that says how it will work. And there isn't such research right now.
And Common Core is just the opening wedge. It sounds innocuous, it sounds good. Why shouldn't we have, same math standards in every single state? But then it turns out that at the high school level, they're about 2 grades lower.
When the Common Core lessons are shown to be bunk, the initiative has a built-in fallback position, which is to claim that this is the result of shoddy implementation and not the standards themselves. This is a way to remove themselves from responsibility.
The definition of college readiness, I think it's a fair critique that it's a minimal definition of college readiness.
For some colleges.
Well, for the colleges most kids go to, but not that most parents probably aspire, right?
It's not for STEM. It's not for international.
That's true. It's not only not for STEM. It's also not for selective colleges that, for example, UC Berkeley. Even whether you're going to be an engineer or not, you'd better have pre-calculus to get into UC Berkeley, right? But we have to think of our
engineering colleges
and that's
scientific.
That's true. I think the third pathway goes a lot towards that. But your issue is really broader than that.
Oh yes.
So I just wanted to make sure that we got that out.
I'm not just thinking of selective colleges. There's a much broader question here.
That's right. It's both, I think, in the sense of being clear about what this college readiness does and doesn't get you, and that's the big subject.
But not to call something college ready when it only applies to a certain kind of college and a certain lower level of mathematical expertise that won't buy you far on the international market in most major disciplines of technology, economics, business, and so on.
Bill Gates' bribe money sold the program to PTAs, local school boards, teachers' unions, and legislators. Now that the country has seen what it has agreed to, there is open rebellion in many locales.
More serious criticism of Common Core has been leveled at the standards themselves and their development by a host of critics, including professors of education, mathematicians, former members of the Department of Education, the largest teachers' union in the country, and countless other professionals.
They want a centralized system in which things are directed by people like them who think they know better for what's good for other people's children.
Billions of dollars will be made now that school systems across the nation have to purchase yearly batteries of tests for each student, as well as hardware and software. If I do a part 2 of this video, I will delve into Microsoft and Pearson testing, which are now programming your children to be compatible with their products rather than the other way around. Common Core originated with profiteers, privatizers who see your kids as cash cows, and they are trapped in a long con called K-12 education.
Why doesn't Gates send his own children to a school that actually makes use of the standards? Instead, the prestigious Lakeside School in Seattle that the Gates children attend does not mention the Common Core math or language arts standards anywhere on their website, and explicitly states that their school is for more advanced children, and thus eschews the standard testing that forms the basis of the Common Core system. As opposition to Common Core continues to rise and implementation continues to proceed, concerned parents, students, and community members would do well to ask why Common Core is good enough for their own children, but not for the privileged offspring of the Gates and the other billionaire oligarchs behind the modern education system.
Summing up Common Core, there is no process for addressing the numerous problems with the standard. There's no feedback, there's no input from the people who are affected by it. The concerns of teachers, parents, psychologists are all ignored because the standard has no feedback loop, has no self-correcting mechanism. It is not going to change, essentially. The only solution is to scrap it and implement better standards.